Hello, it's Katie here. Today I want to teach you a bead weaving technique called square stitch. So we're going to be using needle and thread and working with seed beads. Now I've put this together as part of a blog post, and in that I've explained a lot more about the best tools, beads you can use for this technique. It's a nice simple stitch, but it's something I always think of as a bit of a Cinderella stitch when it comes to bead weaving. So you don't see it that often, but you might find it in small parts of other projects. It's actually a really useful technique to know, so that's why I wanted to share it with you here today. It's a technique I use to make the necklace I'm wearing, and I'll take that off and show that in a bit more detail and explain to you what the technique looks like. Then we'll get out the beads and I'll show you how it all works. So I'll be back in a second with a few samples to share. Okay, so let's take a look at what square stitch actually looks like and what you can do with it. First up, we've got this long length here. Now that is basic square stitch, except that this is actually a little trick piece I'm showing you here. I actually made this on a loom. So square stitch and bead loom weaving look pretty much the same, which is handy to know because if you've been admiring some bead loom weaving projects and you don't have a loom, you can actually make them up in square stitch. So what we've got is basically an alignment where the beads across the rows sit directly next to each other, and then they sit directly one on top of each other as you work the rows up and down. So that's the very basic variation. But as with most bead weaving, there's lots you can do with the basics. So if I just bring in this little necklace here, the front focal piece is actually made in square stitch. And you can see already we've lost that straight strip that I was just showing you. We've got some shaping added on here, and that's what creates the interesting sides. The pattern you're seeing is literally just variations in bead colours. So we'll come on and look at shaping in another video, but you're also going to see square stitched used as a bit of an add-on, if you like. So that's what I've done in this bracelet here. I've actually just used a little bit of square stitch to make the clasp. So I wanted to create a shape that was going to mirror the diamonds from the gem duos I used in the main bracelet. Coming to the other end of the clasp, I also needed a bit of square stitch to just help seal everything in place. So quite often you'll find it referred to as a part of a project. It is in fact a way of creating the odd count turnaround in peyote stitch. You'll sometimes see instructions referring you to use the square stitch variation. Now I've dealt with all of that completely separately, but I thought it was worth a mention. And last up, if I just bring in one of these earrings here, this is also square stitch, but you can see again we've got a lot of shaping in here, and I've managed to create a more 3D effect by layering it. So as with any bead weaving technique, there's really a lot you can do. But let's start off with the basics. So let's get out the beads and I'll show you how to make a basic square stitch strip. Okay, so how does basic square stitch work? Well, we're all set up here. I've got size 6 seed beads in 2 colours, so I'm basically using really big beads to help you see what I'm doing. I've got my needle and thread set up, and I've started out by adding a stop bead, or you can use a bead stopper if you use those, onto one end of the thread. I've left just enough tail thread to be able to stitch in or do something with it later on. But obviously if you're actually working from a pattern, follow whatever instructions you're given there. Now I'm going to start by picking up the number of beads that I want in my first row. So I'm just going to go for 4, so we keep things fairly quick so that I can show you a nice number of rows instead of ploughing all the way along one long row. I'm going to slide those beads up to sit next to my stop bead, so that's preventing them from falling off the end of the thread. And there we go, that's row 1 in place, nice and simple. Now for row 2, what you're going to do is pick up one bead, you're going to pass through
the last bead from row 1, but look how I'm entering it. So my needle is going in the opposite side that the thread is coming out. I'm going to take that all the way through and pull everything up tight. And now you should see my new bead from row 2 is sitting on top of that last bead from row 1. Just going to finish the stitch by continuing to pass on through my new bead. So my thread is now heading back along the row. So I'm ready to add my next bead now. So same process. Pick up one bead. This time I'm going to go through the bead that it will sit on top of. So that's my third bead from the previous row. Again, look at the direction in which I'm passing my needle through. So we've got this kind of circular movement going on all the time. Pull everything up tight, and things are going to be a little bit wonky in the first row. I'm sure you're used to that if you've done any bead weaving before. But I've got my bead sitting where I want it to be, so now I can pass on through it into position ready for the next row. So I can also just pull on my tail threads to try and ease my stopper bead along. Not working, as it typically won't when it's on video, but in theory you can do that to help keep things tight. So next stitch, same process. Pick up one bead. You're passing backwards through the bead from the row below. So that pulls into place, so your new bead is sat in place. And then you're going forwards through your new bead. And we've come to the end of the row, so final stitch, one bead going on the needle, backwards through the bead underneath it, and then on forwards through the bead I have just added. So we've now got 2 rows of 4 beads in place. And if I turn around, I'm ready to repeat that process. So let's switch colour again. So we're picking up one bead, you're passing towards yourself backwards through the bead underneath, pulling everything up in tight, so your new bead sitting in place, and then pass forwards through your new bead. So again, pick up one bead, pass backwards through the bead underneath it, and forwards through the new bead. So pick up a bead, pass backwards through the bead underneath, just make sure your thread doesn't twist, forwards through the new bead, and again we're coming to the end of the row, got new bead on the needle, backwards through the bead underneath it, and forwards through the new bead. Now I'm going to carry on and you can watch me do another row, and while I do that I'm going to talk a little bit about tension for this. You want to work with whatever thread is going to give you a nice firm tension. So that will vary from person to person. If you're just starting out in bead weaving, then try a few different threads and just discover what works well for you. You may even find that some threads work well on some stitches and some work better on other stitches in your case. Now whatever thread you're using, to get the good tension you need, you're going to need to pull everything tight at every stage. So that's when you've just passed through the bead to place it, and also when you've passed through the bead to get into position for the next row or the next stitch. And it can also help if you clamp your threads in between stitches, so you can clamp them between fingers as I'm demonstrating here. That just means it won't slip back out of place before you've had a chance to add another bead. So that is basically square stitch. I've got 4 rows in place now, and I'm just going to keep on and on adding rows. If I had a pattern to add in, I might need to take note of what colour bead I'm adding in which space in the row. My rows could be considerably longer than this, but this is just quite a nice length to do a little practice strip. So I'll leave it to you to go and grab some beads and try practicing. Obviously pause the video whenever you need to, watch it over and over. The more times you watch and try and copy what I'm doing, the easier it will get. And just remember, when you're learning anything, it's going to feel really tricky at first, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you need to keep practicing, keep persevering, and I promise everything will fall into place eventually. So I'm going to leave that in place, send you off to go and give things a try on your own, and I will come back with another video that takes you on the next stage of your square stitch journey, which is showing you how to add shaping to a basic strip. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, just practice that basic technique and see how you get on. Well, I hope you found that helpful and nice and easy to follow. As I said, there's a lot more information in the blog post that I've just given you the link to. And if you've liked any of the patterns that you've seen me showing in this, they're all available as well. Again, all the details are in the blog post. Now, there's plenty more you can do with square stitch, so I'm going to be back again with another video, and in that I'll show you how to start shaping it by increasing and decreasing. So if you're enjoying the basics and you want to take things further, then make sure you stay tuned and see that video as well. Please subscribe to the channel so that way you won't miss out on anything. I've got plenty of technique videos and also other bits of beading fun and trivia and all sorts on here. So I hope you enjoy that, and thank you again for watching. Bye!